Hey guys, so this is 2016 Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager 1700 ABS. I bought this in the first of last November, so it's been just a little over 9 months. I've got almost 8,000 miles on it today. Really liking the bike. I haven't had to do a great deal to it to make it what I want. I put 2-inch handlebar risers on there to bring the handlebars up and back just a little bit. So the cheap, inexpensive backrest. I had to do some modification on that because it was too far up and too far forward, so I had to do some modifying on that one. The Cobra luggage rack has worked out really well. The other thing I did was the foot pegs, the highway pegs. And they're still, because I'm kind of a little on the short side, even with the extension on here, they're still almost need to come a little bit further. So I may try and find some other ones or have to do make a bracket to bring those back just a little bit more. The problem is if I bring them back a little bit too much, if they're folded in, then they get in the way of the foot pedals, which we can't have that. This is 1700 cc's, 6-speed overdrive transmission. It's got ABS brakes, 2 discs on the front, single disc on the back, and it has the Kawasaki K-Act system. Which what the K-Act system does is, if you're going more than 11 miles an hour and you engage the front brakes, it engages both front brakes and the rear brake. Or if you push the back brake, it engages the back brake and one of the front brakes. And of course, the combination of that and the ABS gives you some pretty good stopping power on this. When it was new and the brake pads were still new, you could really feel the K-Act kick in. You could feel it more. I mean, you can still feel it a little bit, but it's not quite so grabby like it was when the brake pads were new. And it actually works out pretty well. I haven't changed the air cleaner or the exhaust. I did put a new air cleaner in, but it's still the stock air cleaner. I didn't upgrade to anything different. The exhaust is still stock. I have no intention of changing the exhaust. I don't want anything louder. I did put mirror extenders on here to bring the mirrors out, because the stock mirror, these are the stock mirrors, but where they're mounted in here, they're just a little bit too close and you can't see behind you very good. So with 2-inch extenders on here, it works out really well. I also added a phone mount here in the middle, which I have GPS, Garmin GPS in here. I did not buy the motorcycle GPS. I just didn't want to spend the extra money for it. I've also got some USB charging ports that I've added. This phone mount has a USB charging port in it. And then I also have 2 charging ports in that left glove box. There is a 12-volt outlet right here from the factory. I also put a 12-volt accessory connection underneath the back seat, and then I can run a cord into the saddlebag with a couple of USB charging ports that I can hook up something there if I need to. I discovered in the hot weather, the trunk can get pretty hot, so be careful what you put in the trunk. Don't put any electronics in there. The saddlebags have been staying pretty cool. They're not too bad, but the trunk can get warm. The heat from the engine, you notice it. They're not as bad as the older models used to be, because they have an extra fan down behind the engine here that actually helps pull more air out away from the driver. Then you have these louvered leg shields, and you open up the louvers during the hotter weather, get some airflow through there, and it helps quite a bit. You can't really ride this. I wouldn't recommend riding this in shorts, because the heat off especially the right side of the engine, can be pretty good. But if you got pants decent pants on, it's not really an issue. You know, the exhaust is, you do have, this is a heat shield over the actual exhaust, but it still gets extremely hot right here. I had some of my other rain gear that got melted to the exhaust. Otherwise, it's been a really good bike. It takes about 3,000 to 5,000 miles to really break it in good. Maximum torque on this thing is at 2,850 RPM. So the bike really likes the 2,500 to 3,000 RPM range. With the 6-speed overdrive transmission, so cruising on the freeway 75, 80 is not a problem at all. You can cruise like that all day long. It's very comfortable. The bike gets up to speed, you know, real quick because of the weight and the size of it. It weighs about 900 pounds. Because of the weight and the size of it, you don't feel like you're going as fast as you are. If you get a smaller bike, especially if you have something without the windshield fairing, then it feels like you're going faster. We've got full instrumentation here. We've got full instrumentation. We've got our fuel gauge. You've got the fuel gauge, speedometer, which has kilometers per hour in the center. The digital output in the middle, which has your gear indicator, your odometer, and trip meters, gas mileage, and then your warning lights. And you got your ABS and cruise set lights down here. Your tach, we redline at 6,000 RPM, and then your temperature gauge. During warm weather or stop and go traffic, it can get up there pretty high. It gets up there almost to the last mark on a hot day in stop and go traffic. But that's not really a problem. These bikes run hot. The bike. It does lean over a little bit too far for me. Because of the weight of this thing, and you get a passenger on the back, sometimes it actually leans over too far on the kickstand. So what I did was I put a hockey puck on the bottom of the kickstand. I just drilled a couple of holes, put a couple of stainless steel bolts into a hockey puck, and that brings it up 1 inch, you know, more, which works out really well. And of course, because this doesn't have a reverse, you still, because of the weight of the thing, you still have to be careful where you're parking. Because you're not going to back it up that easy from a dead stop. If you get a little bit going, you can kind of roll over a hill, but you've got to be careful where you park. Gas mileage wise, I'm getting probably averaging roughly 38 to 40. It's kind of where it seems to be settling in at. If you got a lot of headwinds, then it gets down to about 36, and sometimes I've had it up, depending on where you're going and whatnot, I've had it up to about 44. But realistically, 38 to 42 is kind of generally where it's been, and 38 to 40 most of the time for the kind of driving I ended up doing seems to be pretty much where it settles out at. It's got a 5.3 gallon tank. The fuel tank, the fuel indicator, fuel gauge is much more accurate than the other bike was. So this one, when it gets down to empty and the fuel indicator light comes on, you've got a little over a gallon of gas left. And so it works out pretty well. I usually plan on getting gas at about 150 miles. It gives me enough leeway, you know, that it's not a problem. So I try to plan things out. When I'm planning a trip, I try to plan about 150 miles for gas. It does take Supreme Premium. They want a minimum 90 octane on this. Our state right here, we've got mid-grade is 89 octane, and premium is 92 octane. I've been putting premium in there. I could probably get away with doing the mid-grade, and you can try it and see if the motor starts knocking a little bit, then you got to go up to a higher grade gas. Putting gas in this, a lot of times at a lot of the gas stations you have to use two hands and put one hand to pull back the their anti-splash guard that they have in order to engage it, because the depth on the fill neck here is not that deep, and of course you're filling right on top of the frame, so you got the frame going through the middle of the tank there, so you got to fill over at an angle a little bit to get it in there good, so it doesn't splash back on you. Once you get used to it, not a problem, but you got to be careful that you don't get the gas splashing back at you. The stereo is not like the greatest. I mean, it works fine, but if you're into listening to tunes and you're really into tunes, I would recommend, you know, at least upgrading the speakers, if not the whole stereo system. There is no Bluetooth integration for the stereo. It has an AM/FM radio. It does have an option to be able to add a CB radio to it. There is a connector. You can buy a connector to hook up in this left glove box for the iPod, Apple's iPod. I did wire in a auxiliary connector so that I can plug in a phone or an iPod or something so that I can play tunes through the stereo. But for the most part, I don't play tunes that much. Sometimes around town a little bit I will, but yeah, if I was into playing tunes more, I would probably take a look at, like I said, at least doing some new speakers. But it works really well. I haven't had any issues with it. I did get a flat tire on the back tire, but that has nothing to do with the quality of the bike. I ended up having to replace that rear tire. So I replaced that at 2,000 miles. I got about 6,000 miles on the rear tire now, and I got, you know, say about 8,000 miles on that front tire. The seat height is, what is it, 28.3, I think? I forgot now. But I'm about 5'8", and the seat height is a little bit high for me. But it's workable once you get used to balancing the bike. I would like it if it was an inch lower, would make a big difference, but I don't really want to modify the seat. It's well padded. It's probably the most comfortable stock seat I have ever sat on. I don't anticipate changing the seat until it gets worn out. The back seat here had a the strip across here for hanging on to, but passengers were complaining about that kind of getting into their leg on a longer trip, so we pulled that off. And with the curved backrest, and especially if this is on there also, then the passenger's not going to go anywhere. You know, and then the passenger has, you know, floorboards here too instead of just pegs. These don't stay up that well sometimes, so I might have to take a look at getting some stronger springs or doing something to get those to stay up a little better. Let's see what else we got. The saddlebags open out this way, you know, and you've got a pretty good size area inside this lid, but they don't have anything there to block it or, you know, keep something up there. So I usually, you know, if I'm going camping or something, I'll put sleeping bag or something that I can stuff kind of up in there. Luggage rack doesn't come with it, but that's an add-on. This opens sideways, and you got room for 2 full face helmets in here. But I discovered that once you put the luggage rack on there and you got the bolts on the bottom, even though they don't stick out very far, if you try to get 2 helmets in there again, you're going to put chips in the helmet now with those bolts on it. So I have to take a look at trying to do something with those. Because of the running lights You got the extra running lights on the front. There are LEDs across the back. So everything lights up pretty well. So the bike is very, very visible. And because of the size of the bike and the lights, traffic tends to see you pretty good. So I don't have near as much problem with people not seeing me or pulling out in front of me and things with this than I did with the other bike. Okay, yeah, so this bike, like I said, has been working out really well. The gears on it are probably geared a little bit lower than what I would like, but they work fine. First gear is geared pretty low, so by the time I get through, I'm generally in second gear before I even get through an intersection. And then, your third gear. So then you got basically third gear for the 30s, fourth gear for the 40s, fifth gear for the 50s, and then sixth gear on up. Unless you run a little bit higher RPM. And as far as the RPM goes, like I said, it likes around 2,500 to 3,000 RPM. But this red line's at 6,000, so realistically, you could run it at probably 4,000 RPM continuously without a problem. Not St. Helens, that's right. Running 3,500 RPM is not a problem at all. Okay, which way are we going? Cougar Mountain. Huh. Well, I don't know. GPS is taking me this way, so we'll go this way. But the bike handles real well, not a problem. Because it is a big bike, longer wheelbase so you can't take the corners quite as fast as as a sport bike can. But you can still do pretty good on the corner. Now, when I first got it, I did scrape the bottom on the left side, going around the corner, leaned it over a little bit too far. But since that time, I haven't scraped anything yet on that. I have tipped the bike over a couple times. One time right there, first day I got it. And the problem with, every time you tip the bike over, you're going to get oil in the air cleaner. Or in the air, if you tip it to the left, you're going to get oil up in that air cleaner and the air cleaner cover there. If you tip it onto the right, you're going to get oil into that air cleaner cover that's on the right. The actual air cleaner is on the left side, and there's an air channel between the cylinders there. And it works. So you do get oil up in there, so you got to be sure and clean that out if you tip the bike over. So I did kind of clean out the air cleaner, but I went ahead and put a new air cleaner in it anyway, just because it got some oil in there. The shifting on this is a little clunky, which is pretty normal for these big bikes. The Harley Davidson can be a little clunky also. I wasn't quite used to it because the 750s I had before, were pretty smooth shifting. But first and second gear especially can be clunky. Third, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Depends on your RPM and whatnot. And then fourth and fifth aren't so bad. And generally speaking, the higher you get up in the gears, the less clunky it is. I saw them at McDonald's this morning.